Okay, so today we're going to talk more about geometry. So we've had you kind of doing some algebra stuff, solving some equations, doing a little bit of Pythagorean theorem. Today we're going to get into the core of geometry vocabulary, I guess is the way I want to put that. So geometry is a very visual subject, and it's all based off of a foundation. And today we're going to start laying that foundation. This lesson is on points, lines, and planes. So in order to understand geometry as we keep moving forward, you have to have these three vocabulary words kind of down really good, because this is where our base is. So it says a point is a location. It has neither shape nor size. We use a dot to represent a point. And then it gives you a picture. This is a point, has a little dot, has your letter A, and it says we're going to name that. Well, it's pretty basic. This is A. Point A. So you might say point A, you might say A. This one's pretty easy going. And then in the supported practice, we're going to practice drawing it. So you're going to draw your point and you're going to label it, and it's always labeled with a capital letter. So points are always capital letters. Go ahead and do C, D, and E for me. I know those three were pretty easy, so hopefully, when you look at it, you have them written fairly similarly, just a dot with a capital letter. The next part says points can be by themselves, or they can be part of a line or a shape. So when I look at this one, it says point X is on the line. So we can see right here, we have this line. It has a point on it. The point is labeled X. So X is on the line. So for the supported practice, we're going to draw and label point Y on the line below. So it does not matter if you put Y at the beginning of the line. It doesn't matter if I wanted to put Y at the end of the line, or if I wanted Y somewhere in the middle. It doesn't really matter as long as you put Y somewhere on that line. So that's really all we care about for that particular example. Now, obviously, we just introduced a new word. We introduced the word line. So a line is a straight path made up of points and has no width or thickness. Think of it as like a bunch of points all next to each other in a row. And then it gives us a picture. It says this is line AB, and we write it, and then it gives you kind of this little symbol thing, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in detail. So when you name a line, you have to use 2 points. So we're going to remember 2 points. And it doesn't matter what order I can put it in. So I can call this line AB, or I could call this line BA. Now the important thing is you either have to write the word line in front of it, like it was here, or we have to put the symbol above it. And a line has arrowheads on the front and the back. So what that indicates is that the line continues on and on forever in both directions. So for the supported practice, we're going to practice drawing some of these lines, and we're going to do one of them together, and then you're going to do the other 3 on your own. So when you go to draw your line, you want to make sure you use a straight edge. So that's kind of a big deal. So we're going to use a straight edge to draw our line. We're going to make sure it has arrowheads on the front and the back of the line, because that indicates that it goes on and on forever. And then you're going to make sure you put your dots. It doesn't matter where you put your dots, somewhere on there, and label them with the 2 letters it gave you. So in this case, it's GH. Now I want you to practice drawing QR, JK, and XL. Okay, so now you can check your 3 lines. So your QR, XL, and JK. Again, the things you were supposed to do, you're supposed to use a straight edge, put your arrows on both sides, and then put your 2 dots with the letters it gave you. Looking at the next part, which we already kind of mentioned, there are multiple ways to name a line. So in these cases, the things I want you to remember are order doesn't matter, which we already kind of mentioned. So we can call this line AB, or we can call it line BA. It doesn't matter. The important thing is you have to label. So looking at this next example, we have this line, we have the 2 points EF. So we can call this 2 different things, and I want you to try that one on your own. Again, we can name it forwards or backwards, so line EF or line FE, just make sure you've labeled them with the appropriate label above that. And in this case, if we're dealing with a line, it looks like a line. Now looking at this one, notice there's 3 points on this line. So this gives us lots more ways that we can name it, because again, order doesn't matter, and we only need 2 points to name a line. So looking at this one, we could call this line line ST. We could call this line SU. We could call this line TU, or we could go backwards. We could go line UT, we could go line US, or we could go line TS. So it doesn't matter forwards or backwards, you're just using your two letters. Now let's take a look at the supported practice. So we're going to do a couple of these together. So looking at this first one, we could go from P to Q, so line PQ would be an answer. We could go from P to R, so PR would be an answer, or we could say line QR. Now we just said that we could also go backwards, so we could go RQ, we could go RP, or we could say QP. Now I sometimes get confused if I do it that process, so I typically will look at HK and then I'll go ahead and reverse it. So I've got line HK and line KH. So I've got those two forwards and backwards. Now I could do HA and I could do AH. So we've got those two forwards and backwards, and then I could do KA and AK. So I kind of get all of those forwards and backwards together so I don't miss anything. Now I want you to do the last one on your own, so go ahead and write the 6 different names that you could do for that last one. Okay, so hopefully when you wrote yours out, you got your 6 names. So again, you would have had RN, NR, RB, BR, NB, and BN. And you could have put those in any order. You could have done it like the first set or like we did the second set. The important thing is that each one of those, you have your 2 letters and you have your line symbol above it. Okay, another really important thing that we talk about in geometry is segments. So a line segment is just part of a line. And we say it's a part of the line because notice that a segment kind of has a point in the front and a point in the back. It does not have arrows. So the arrows indicate that it doesn't stop, but a segment has a start and a stop. Again, on segments, just like lines, it doesn't matter what name, like what order you name the letters, but it does take 2 letters, so we still have to have 2 letters. Order doesn't matter, and the label is a little bit different because obviously we don't want to have arrowheads in our label because this one starts and stops. So on this one, we could call this segment AB, or we could call it segment BA. So it's just a little piece of a line without arrowheads. So when I look at the supported practice, just like lines, we want to make sure we use a straight edge when we're doing it. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my little segment piece there. I'm going to have a point at the start and the finish, and I'm going to call the first one F and the second one G. So go ahead and take a second and do segment ST and segment LM. So when you look at yours, you should have, like I said, a straight edge to do your little line piece. You have to have a point in the start and the finish, and we need to use the letters that they gave us. So we have segment ST and segment LM. We've already talked about it, but again, order does not matter. Order does not matter. So it doesn't matter when we're talking about lines, it doesn't matter when we're talking about segments. The only thing really different between a segment and a line is the label, because the label indicates what you're dealing with. So a line goes on forever, it has arrowheads, and the label has arrowheads. A segment starts and stops, it has points, so our little label needs to make sure that it starts and stops. So looking at this next one, again, it does not matter what order we put them in, so I could call this one QR with a little segment bar above it, or I could call this RQ. It doesn't matter as long as we label it correctly. Okay, so now we're going to talk about rays. Rays are also part of a line. This one has a starting point, but it goes forever in one of the directions. So it's kind of like a cross between a segment and a line. When I look at this one, notice in this particular example, it has a point at A, which means it's starting at A, and then it has an arrow that goes through B, so it's going to go forever in B's direction. Now, when you name a ray, you still have to have 2 letters, but this one, this particular one with rays, order matters. So there's only one way that we can name this. We have to start with the point, so we have to start at A, and the second letter is the direction the arrow is pointing. So in this case, the arrow is pointing toward B, And then our label looks exactly like a ray, so it has one arrowhead. So when we look at the supported practice, same as we have on all the rest of them, we're going to start with our straight edge. Now on this one, because it's labeled CD, we do have to start with C, and D has to be somewhere on our ray. It doesn't matter exactly where, it has to be somewhere on it. I do want to do one more with you because I want you to see that it doesn't have to always point in that direction. So I could label this one the W and this one the X and have the arrow pointing this way. It still works because I have to have a starting point of W, and then the X has to be going in the direction of the arrow. So it doesn't always have to look exactly the way that we think it should. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and do the last one on your own. So again, you needed to start with point Y and have point Z somewhere in the direction of the arrow. And then down here in this little picture, it kind of shows you what we just talked about. So it says rays can go in any direction. We always name rays starting with the endpoint. So order does matter. So looking at this first one, this one starts at R and goes toward Q. So we have to call this RQ. Looking at the next one, this one starts at C and has to go toward S because it's CS. And on the last one here, we have to start at V and we go toward the X. So this is ray VX. And then we have some examples down here. So again, this says draw TV, so ray TV, draw ray AM, and then you have to name the last two rays. So I do want you to take a few moments to do those 4 examples for me. Okay, and now you can check your answers. So again, for the first one, it had to start at point T and go toward V. The second one had to start at A and go toward M. The third one, when we name it, we know it has to start with J, and then A has to be your second point. And the last one, you had to start at L, and it has to go toward your T. So that pretty much sums up points, lines, segments, and rays. That means we only had planes left, which we're going to talk about here in just a little bit in the next video.